Our story begins with our protagonist, Jinfrey, entering the building and experiencing a familiar sensation. He thinks to himself that although it should be his first time in this setting, he feels nostalgic, a sentiment that isn't new to him, as he has felt this familiarity as far back as he can remember. That IT makes him believe he has known this world since the beginning. Someone then calls his name and thanks him for waiting, asking him if he is there today for the adventurer's registration. He replies with a yes. The lady begins typing something on her computer, and he notices a similarity with the lady, feeling as though he has met her before. With a smile, she tells him that everything is set and they should display the window. Suddenly, the system pops up in front of him and informs him that his authentication will begin once he waves his right hand. Surprised by this, he remembers the sense of déjà vu he has been feeling. When he doesn't respond, the lady asks if something is wrong, but he remains silent, realizing that these are memories from his previous life, memories of playing in this world. He is now confident that the place he is currently in is part of a game known as Grand 7, a virtual world where players journey across 7 continents to achieve world peace. That it's a classic online game, that he is stunned as memories of that world flood his mind. Jinfrey, just a normal person who dreams of becoming an adventurer and earning enough riches to provide a fulfilling life for his family, shakes in disbelief that the world he had been living in was just the game world from his previous life. Although the realization seems crazy, he smiles, thinking it means he is virtually unstoppable. The lady, looking worried, asks him if he is all right because he has been trembling for a while. He tells her not to mind him, dismissing his trembling as just a warrior's excitement. The system informed him that the authentication would begin once he waved his right hand, while he wondered why his previous memories had returned now. He decided to use these recollections to his advantage moving forward. The system displayed that he was 19 years old, but his level and job were listed as none. Also, all his stats were unknown. The lady replied that she understood and told him to take care. He then walked through the portal and was surprised to find himself in a floating space. The system indicated that he had entered the baptismal altar. He was amazed that even the baptismal altar looked exactly like it did in the game, and he knew that in the game's tutorial stage, 5 new adventurers were to come together, but he noticed that everything was unfolding just as it had in the game. But now it was his reality. If he died, that would be the end. However, he thought if he could leverage his knowledge from his past life, becoming a successful adventurer wouldn't just be a dream. The announcer then informed them that the baptism ritual would begin in 30 seconds, urging them to choose their equipment. That he smiled, noticing that even the announcement was the same as in the game, that he watched other players rush toward the floating weapons to make their selections. 2 players scrambled for the Guardian Spear, ranked E+ with 21 attack and 50 durability. The bald man yelled at a woman to not let go of the spear, but she retorted that she had grabbed it first. Meanwhile, a nerd was reaching for the red sword, ranked E with 19 attack and 60 durability, when another man punched him and claimed the sword for himself. Jinfrey watched calmly, remembering he had witnessed this scenario too. The forced job system would depend on their performance in the baptism ritual, and their job choices would be limited. That he knew this system was particularly unfair to beginners, recalling his own previous life when he had repeatedly reset until a desirable job appeared. After the bald man overpowered the woman for the spear, he noticed Jinfrey and taunted him, calling him a sloth and mockingly asking if he was acting smug. Ignoring the bald man, Jinfrey walked towards the left where the weapons were arrayed and focused on the weapon he had in mind. He stopped in front of a normal short sword, ranked F, with only 1 attack and 90 durability. The bald man mockingly shouted that it had only 1 attack stat, warning him not to come crying. When he ended up with a poor job, Jinfrey just smiled, pondering the common assumption that an adventurer's strength is determined by their job. What if that common sense was wrong? He chose the normal short sword, confident that a mob's knowledge couldn't compare with that of a hardcore player, and believing that the only right choice was that very sword. When they had all selected their weapons, the voice announced that the baptism ritual would begin and that they had a 5-minute time limit. Flies then appeared above them, and the voice instructed them to defeat as many creatures as possible. That he recognized the creatures before him as winged centipedes, a species unique to the baptism ritual, known for their paralyzing poison that could immobilize anyone. The bald man teasingly told him to try not to get killed and arrogantly smiled at him, prompting Jinfrey to sigh and wonder what the bald man's problem was. He thought it best to ignore such behavior, recognizing that such types were common even in the game. The announcer declared the start of the ritual, The winged centipedes charged at them point. One of the centipedes swooped lower towards him, and he noticed that its appearance and movements were identical to those in the game, which meant their weak point must be the same too. As the creature rushed to attack, he charged forward, drew his sword, and despite the rough critical hit system, he swung his sword and easily slashed the creature. The system then popped up, confirming he had defeated the winged centipede, leaving the other adventurers shocked, but he simply smiled and confidently thought that it was perfect. The bald man accused him of just being lucky and warned him not to get cocky. However, the truth was the bald man couldn't believe he had taken it down with one hit and wondered what exactly Jinfrey had done. Jinfrey knew that most games had bugs and it was normal. This game had one too. A bug that could only be used in the baptism ritual, that if they hit the winged centipede's weak point with a normal short sword, it would result in a one-hit kill. Confident that it was the same as in the game, he walked closer to the swarm of winged centipedes armed with this knowledge. Meanwhile, he saw the lady and the others struggling to fight. The bald man managed to kill some winged centipedes and proudly shouted for everyone to look at his skills, boasting that with such prowess he would definitely secure the strongest job, the swordsman. Jinfrey thought the bald man was merely distracting others with loud, unnecessary bravado, making him worse than some trolls in the game. Suddenly, a winged centipede appeared close to him, but he managed to dodge IT tried to attack him from behind, which he also dodged, thinking this might be more fun than in the game. It swooped down to attack again. He bent his body down, and it was caught off guard when he jumped up and slashed it into pieces. The voice announced that the time limit was over and instructed them to conclude the baptism ritual.it, then informed them that job selection would be based on their performance. The system interface appeared before each adventurer. 2 players who had defeated 7 winged centipedes saw their available job choices: hunter, compounder, and shield user. One man remarked that defeating 7 didn't offer good job options, while a woman expressed her disappointment at not being able to become a summoner, acknowledging that reality often differed from one's desires. The nerd, who hadn't defeated any creatures, found himself unable to register as an adventurer with no available jobs. The bald man laughed loudly, boasting that he had killed 15 winged centipedes with 15 kills. His job choices included fighter, thief, hunter, and swordsman. That he then turned to Jinfrey, noticing him deep in thought while looking at his own system window. Calling him a lucky guy, he asked Jinfrey what jobs he had been offered. Jinfrey, looking puzzled, didn't respond, leaving the bald man shocked upon seeing his options. The system displayed that Jinfrey had defeated 33 winged centipedes, with available job choices being swordsman, mage, thief, fighter, summoner, hunter, shield user, compounder, and alchemist. The bald man couldn't fathom how Jinfrey had the option to choose from all those jobs with 33 kills. Annoyed, he walked away, dismissively telling Jinfrey he could swordsman too. Jinfrey calmly responded that it was good for him, but internally noted that with only 15 kills, the bald man's chance of being offered the swordsman job was less than 2%, making the bald man truly the fortunate one. That he was aware that swordsman and summoner were considered the strongest jobs in the game, but he had already decided on his choice. Shortly thereafter, the system confirmed his job selection and awarded him the initial equipment as a first-time bonus. The system congratulated him for choosing compounder as his job, which shocked everyone present. The bald man stuttered in disbelief, asking if he was stupid, and loudly proclaimed that the compounder was the weakest job available. Undeterred, Jinfrey simply smiled and opened his inventory, that he believed that whether a compounder was weak or not depended entirely on the player, and his primary goal in hunting 33 creatures was to collect the drop items exclusive to the baptism ritual. The system then revealed his loot: 5 winged centipede tails, 9 winged centipede wings, and 3 vials of winged centipede blood, all of F rarity. The bald Sam looked on, puzzled by Jinfrey's actions. Jinfrey placed all the drop items along with his normal short sword into the crafting interface. Using his job skill, Compound, which required 12 mana, he began the compounding process. This skill was precisely why he had chosen the compounder job. The other players watched in awe as he skillfully combined the items. Jinfrey knew that the result would be a piece of equipment so powerful it could fundamentally change the game dynamics. Shortly after, the system confirmed that he had successfully created a new weapon. The system displayed his newly forged sword named Centipede, with an unknown rank, an attack power of 66, and a durability of 1500. That its first skill, Mind's Eye, dealt triple damage when targeting an enemy's weak point. The second and third skills would unlock under specific conditions. The strength of an adventurer is determined by their level and job skill. Equipment is generally considered just a support item, enhancing attack or defense and nothing more. However, Jinfrey knows that there are cleverly concealed pieces of equipment that defy norm, items that overwhelmingly enhance the user's strength or defense. Hardcore players refer to items like his centipede as hidden equipment. Later, he arrived at the town of new adventurers. Rogues begin and observe people walking around and vendors selling their wares that he was relieved to see that the place resembled the game world that a lady approached and asked if he would like an apple. Moments later, he was eating an apple on the side, satisfied that he had obtained the first hidden equipment just as he planned. However, he pondered his next steps that he knew the objective of the game was straightforward. Forward across all 7 continents, there existed one S-rank dungeon, and players needed to slay all 7 of the boss monsters residing there. After eating the apple, he decided he needed to get stronger and resolved to start grinding in the dungeons immediately. Although the standard practice was to clear the dungeons in order, starting with the F rank. He proceeded directly to the teleportation portal for the C rank dungeon. His destination was the forest inhabited by the Guardian, a C rank dungeon, where his mission was to slay the boss monster. Upon entering, the system warned him that he could not level up until the clear condition had been met. He checked his status window, which showed his health at 122, mana at 18 out of 30, strength at 21, defense at 27, intelligence at 30, speed at 19, and luck at 11. Knowing the recommended level for entry was between 17 and 30, that he felt the danger of venturing in at level 1. That suddenly, he sensed something behind him, that IT was a level 17 devil plant. Not giving him even a moment's respite, he gripped his sword tightly, positioning it in front of him, aware that one hit could be fatal. The devil plant launched its roots in an attack. He dodged them. Relieved that he recognized the attack pattern, he then swung his sword at the devil plant, knowing it was vulnerable after its attack. His strike was a critical hit, triggering his mind's eye sword skill, which effortlessly defeated the devil plant. He was thrilled to have defeated the devil plant in one hit, and the experience points he gained increased his level by 9. As he viewed his status window, he remembered that his health and mana automatically increased with each level up. Additionally, for every level gained, they received 5 skill points, which could be used to enhance any stat of their choice that he chose to. Allocate all 45 of his skill points to his defense, reasoning that he could deal sufficient damage if he maximized his defensive capabilities. Clutching his centipede sword, he expressed his happiness about both his increased level and improved stats. Thanking the weapon for its aid and noting how well things were going, he recognized that the centipede's active skill, Mind's Eye, was extremely useful, and with its 66 attack power, it could likely handle the B-rank dungeon on the first continent. However, he believed the true value of his centipede was yet to be revealed, which made things increasingly interesting. Deciding to target the boss deep within the dungeon while leveling up, he ventured deeper into the forest. There he was startled to find himself surrounded by 3 level 23 noir snakes, a rare encounter since meeting 3 simultaneously had a less than 1% chance. Suddenly, one of the snakes lunged at him with its mouth open, but he managed to jump away just in time while noting the snake's ferocious natures. Reminiscent of the game, that he failed to see another noir snake sneaking up behind him, as it nearly bit him. He swiftly bent backward to dodge, running away with the snakes in pursuit. He urged himself to remain calm, questioning why he was panicking when he knew their attack patterns and vulnerabilities well, that he then leaped towards their necks. The only part he could effectively slash, that he believed a one-shot kill was possible if he executed his move correctly. His centipede neared one noir's neck, another blocked him with its head, indicating they were protecting each other. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain as the third noir into his shoulder, splattering his blood. Grimacing in pain and with a trembling hand, he managed to slash the attacking Moira's neck with his centipede. The kill awarded him enough experience points to increase his level by 3. As expected, the pain was intense, and the system alerted him that he was in critical condition, urging him to escape and recover immediately. His health had dropped to 8 out of 169, yet he smiled, satisfied with the outcome and knowing it was within his expected range. By boosting his defense to 72 when he reached level 10, but he had ensured a second chance for survival. With full health, he wouldn't be one-shot in this dungeon. Furthermore, the conditions had now been met to unlock the second skill level of his centipede. The system updated to show that his speed had increased to 171. When the noir snakes came close, he swiftly slashed them with his new centipede skill, Divine Excel, which has a passive effect of 10 times speed and activates only when the wearer is on the verge of death. He then successfully defeated the 2 remaining noir snakes and told them, somewhat apologetically, that he just couldn't die, yet he received experience points that increased his level by 4, bringing him to level 17. He watched the dead noir snakes disappear, thinking that at least his level grind was going well for now. He knew that in that situation, treating his wounds should be the norm. But if he recovered his health now, his 10 times speed buff when in a critical state would disappear. He thought he shouldn't waste that speed advantage. And with his experience and knowledge, it was manageable. Standing up, he considered how painful it would be to receive enough damage to enter that state again, that he then proceeded deeper and encountered some monsters, which he easily defeated. That he smiled, knowing that those weak mobs were a breeze, and decided to convert his 10 times speed to 10 times experience points. That he knew it probably wasn't that simple, but he was confident it increased his efficiency. That he continued walking, thinking it would be fine to keep leveling like this until the boss appeared, because he needed to compound an item before the boss fight. And the ingredients he needed were water, thorn grass, strong acidic berry, caterpillars, skull jelly leaves, fresh blood flower, and hariri seed. Suddenly, a monster appeared behind him while he was busy thinking that there were way too many ingredients just to compound AD rank item. He managed to kill the monster easily, feeling annoyed that they had made it a bit realistic. Remembering that the game itself was disliked for that reason, he sighed, frustratedly acknowledging that nothing would change just by complaining. That he then decided to collect the materials before encountering the boss. That a moment later, he was near the waterfall and gathered some thorn grass and fresh blood flower. He then unearthed something from the ground that was a strong acidic berry, making him think that things were going well. However, he was surprised when someone asked if it was him. That he turned around, wondering who it was, and saw men from the same village as his. One man asked him what the hell he was doing being an adventurer, and called him Jinfrey the loser. That he addressed the man as Julius and thought that Julius had become an adventurer about 2 to 3 years ago, yet he was still loitering around there. Julius then asked if he was compounding when he saw his weapon, and told him it looked like he couldn't even afford new equipment. The man asked Julius if he was his friend, but Julius replied no, stating that they just lived in the same village when they were kids, and that Jinfrey was the poorest one in their village. So Jinfrey couldn't be his friend, because it would be embarrassing. Julius also tells the man that Jinfrey's father is dead and his mother is sick, bedridden all day, which makes the man think that Jinfrey is a miserable guy. However, he keeps his silence, thinking that Julius is an awful person to meet there. It's true that Jinfrey's father died when he was little, and even now his sister is looking after his mother, which is why he became an adventurer to earn money. Julius then calls to him, asking if he is listening, and tells him that he is telling him his heroic tale right now. But Jinfrey just stares at him. Julius asks him what's with the look and if he wants to get smacked like back then. Julius then grabs his collar, making Jinfrey wonder what he should do there. Just as Julius was about to hit him, they heard a loud roaring sound that made them stop in horror and confusion. The man, looking up stutteringly, tells them that the boss monster, a level 31 Cyclops, had appeared. Julius asks the man what he is doing and shouts at him to run quickly, but he tells Julius that he is being targeted. The Cyclops then raised its weapon and smashed the man to death, leaving Jinfrey stunned in shock and cursing that in horror. Julius was on the ground, shaking in fear and shouting as he witnessed his friend die. The Cyclops, with its one-eyed skill, looked in their direction and walked closer to Jinfrey. He was busy thinking that their level gap was dangerous, and that if it had a lot of defense, his attacks probably wouldn't go through. The Cyclops then swung its weapon down at the spot where he was standing, but fortunately, he managed to run away. However, the Cyclops looked at him once again, making him realize that he was being targeted, and then the system showed him that with the effect of the one-eyed skill, he could not escape from that battle. That he took out his centipede. Knowing there was no other way, the Cyclops raised its weapon to attack him again, and he jumped away to dodge it. He knew all of its moves, and with Divine Excel, he had more than enough speed. Julius was shocked to witness him fighting the Cyclops one-on-one, making him wonder if he really was the Jin, for he knew and what was happening right now. He was running when he realized that running around wouldn't solve anything. When the Cyclops weapon hit the ground, he jumped onto it and ran at full speed to get on the Cyclops. That reached for him with its other hand in anger and tried to grab him, but he managed to jump up to avoid it. That he then headed behind it and saw that its nape was fully exposed. He then launched his attack from behind, and he then struck its nape, but as he had anticipated, he could hardly damage it. When he pulled his sword out of its nape, the Cyclops felled it and growlingly tried to hit him with its weapon, but he jumped away in time, causing it to smack its own name. that he noticed that it was difficult to fight it on even ground given their level gap. Meanwhile, Julius was hiding under a bush, watching the fight and amazed at Jinfrey's speed and dodging the Cyclope's attacks. Julius wondered what buff Jinfrey was using, as he couldn't see his movements at all. On the other hand, Jinfrey was busy dodging the Cyclope's attacks when he exhaustingly realized that he really needed to create it. He knew that he already had Thorngrass's strong acidic berry and fresh blood flowers. Oh, he just needed to find the remaining ingredients. That he looked around, knowing that he could find those things there. But then his gaze fell on Julius, who looked confused and was surrounded by the remaining ingredients. Jinfrey then ran in Julius' direction, making Julius shout at him not to come there while he was being chased by the Cyclops. Jinfrey swiftly grabbed the caterpillar hariri seed and skull jelly leaves. He then rushed to the water, which was the last ingredient he needed. When he obtained the water, he knew everything was set, so he immediately used his compounding skill and all the ingredients mixed together. After that, he successfully compounded a poison of E rarity, which poisoned the drinker, decreasing their health every second. Julius saw it and asked him if he was stupid, pointing out that Cyclops are highly resistant to poison, and even if he made it drink the poison, the effect wouldn't last. Jinfrey calmly told Julius that he was aware of that. He then grabbed the noir snake's cerebrospinal fluid, which is of C rarity, and the poison he had just made because his goal from the beginning was to compound the poison with the noir snake CSF. After compounding them, he successfully created a strong poison of D rarity, which severely poisoned the drinker, decreasing their health every second. Julius wondered what it was, and if it was an item compounded twice. Jinfrey then compounded the strong poison into his centipede's sword, shocking Julius, who asked him what he was doing. The system then showed that he had added a poisonous attribute to centipede, but Jinfrey knew that this was the true form of the weapon. Julius, witnessing everything, wondered what was happening and if Jinfrey really had added attributes to his weapon by compounding 3 times. Suddenly, the Cyclopes appeared behind Julius, and Jinfrey confidently told the Cyclopes that he had kept it waiting, but they should go for round 2. The Cyclopes then angrily raised its weapon and swung it in his direction, making water splash everywhere. But fortunately, Jinfrey jumped away in time and speedily moved around the Cyclops, who was trying to hit him. When its weapon hit the ground, Jinfrey jumped to get closer to its head, but he then raised his sword while telling it that he knew its entire attack pattern. The Cyclopes looked up to see him, but it was too late for the Cyclopes because he slashed its nape with his poisonous centipede. It screamed in pain while the system showed that the Cyclopes had been severely poisoned and its HP would decrease every second. However, the Cyclopes nullified the poison. Yet Jinfrey raised his centipede and told it that he would do it as many times as he had to. That he then slashed the Cyclopes and severely poisoned it again. That IT screamed in pain and nullified the poison, but he continued to attack it, and it continued to nullify the poison he was inflicting. But a moment later, because his continuous attacks, the poison spread throughout the Cyclops' body, making it weaker. That he thought the poison was the right answer when he saw the Cyclops drool. That he then jumped higher to get on its head and decided to finish it. That he then pointed his centipede down and pierced the Cyclops' one eye. Thanks to his centipede's mind's eye skill, he dealt a critical hit and brought the Cyclops down to the ground. He then safely landed on the ground as the Cyclops' body fell, while the system showed that he had defeated the Cyclops and earned experience points. Julius, who was still hiding, couldn't believe it and wondered if it was serious that the man in front of him was really Jinfrey. He then glanced at Julius, making him jump in shock and run away, fearing that he might be attacked next. Jinfrey put his centipede back in his inventory, thinking that things had somehow worked out. He then called up his status, and the system showed that his level had increased by 23. His speed was currently buffed, and his status was critical. That he was glad that his level had gone up a bit, and decided to think about his unused skill points later. That he then opened his inventory, and the system showed that he had received 350,000 gold as a reward for subjugating the dungeon boss, and obtained a Cyclops fan, which was of D rarity. That he was pleased that he had earned quite a lot of gold from the boss subjugation, and was excited to send the gold to his mother. He then clicked through the system, knowing that one of the biggest advantages of playing solo was being able to collect all the rewards. He then saw the reward material, a Cyclops eyeball of C rarity, a somewhat grotesque-looking item that IT could also be sold for a decent price. That he closed the system, deciding to ignore its appearance, knowing that with it he had obtained one of the materials he needed for the next hidden equipment. Later, he arrived at a flat-plane D-rank dungeon, and as he looked around, he felt nostalgic. That he knew that the final goal of the game was to defeat the demon god on all 7 continents. starting from. The first one on this continent. For that, he needed to find the second. Hidden equipment from this place, that he took out his centipede, thinking that to solve the trial at the fallen goddess's statue, he needed the Cyclops' eyeball and one more material, which was why he had come there. The monsters growled at him when they saw him, and when they rushed at him, he immediately slashed them, knowing that he needed to grind some levels too, with the ultimate aim of defeating all the demon gods and creating a peaceful world, free from any monsters. That he then thought about how much money he would make, enough for his family to lead a good life, and to silence all those villagers who looked down on him, that he knew that he just needed to get stronger. And with that, he could achieve everything. After killing the monsters, his level increased once more. Meanwhile, a reporter delivers today's adventure news from the Adventurer Association and tells everyone that yesterday, a new adventurer defeated 33 creatures at the baptism ceremony, setting an unprecedented record that has become a hot topic within the association. Additionally, according to more detailed information, the name of the new adventurer is Jinfrey Van Raid, described as a black-haired man with blue eyes who is headed for the town of beginnings. In the D dungeon, Jinfrey was busy fighting monsters, unaware of the news. He looked around, puzzled because he had been searching for a while, yet couldn't find what he was looking for. He knew he had already gathered various materials, but he still needed the cobalt bird feathers. Although the cobalt bird itself isn't a rare monster, there are a total of 7 dungeons on one continent. Among them, 6 are ranked from F to A, and the 7th, where the god resides, is ranked as the largest spawn rate for the cobalt bird. Should have been in the D-ranked dungeon on the first continent, which is where he was, but he couldn't find anything. Resigned, he put his centipede back into his inventory, guessing that he'd go back to the city first to try to find some information on it. Hours later, he was back in the city, and he was certain there was a general store around there, and he found one. And just as he approached the door, he heard something being crushed inside and someone shouting. That a man then came out laughing and told his men that they should scram point. One of the men pushed Jinfrey aside as they walked away, happily shouting that they had caught another big fish, making him wonder if it was a robbery. The men were walking toward the stairs where a mother and her child were descending. When the mother looked back, one of the men pushed the child to get out of their way, and the child fell toward the stairs. Her mother shouted in worry and panic, but fortunately Jinfrey caught the child in time before she could land badly on the stairs. He then glared at the men, particularly the leader, who was running away. The child ran to her mother, crying in fear, while her mother thanked him, which he replied that it was nothing. While the mother comforted her scared child, the men continued to run away. Suddenly, the man beside him angrily said that those men were damned mountain dogs. Assuming the man was probably the store owner, Jinfrey asked what he meant by mountain dogs. The owner replied that those men were from the Mountain Dog Guild, a group of thieves and poachers who had recently made that area their territory. Jinfrey couldn't believe that such a guild existed, and the shop owner mentioned that the recent overhunting of the cobalt bird was also their doing, which surprised him as he was currently gathering information and getting stumped. He then realized that the mountain dogs were to blame. The shop owner frustratingly told him that those men didn't care whether they harmed ordinary people, women, or children, and that they were the worst. That he sighed and said that it looked like he needed to close his shop. For a while, the shop owner then walked back to his shop, and the mother and child walked away. Jinfrey thought about the Mountain Dog Guild and realized it was a hassle, because he knew that a guild was basically a gathering of adventurers with the same ideology, and even he didn't want to mess with a guild by himself. However, when he figured out that they caused trouble to others, his anger rate rose by 10%, and learning they were over hunting cobalt birds, his anger spiked by 90%, which fumed him completely. That he then decided to chase after them. That a moment later, he arrived at an alley full of destroyed things and trash. That he peeked around the corner of the wall and saw the men enjoying themselves. The leader told his men that it looked like they had cleaned out most of the shops in the area, to which one of the men agreed and mentioned that their boss had told them that they should move on. Jinfrey noticed that they were carrying their loot and wondered where the cobalt bird feathers were. He looked around at the men's loot and spotted a jar in one of the boxes. Inside, he found the feathers and realized that they were the ones who had hunted the birds to oblivion. The leader then asked if they had watched the adventure news, and one of the men questioned what they meant by 33 and if it wasn't crazy. The leader told his men that the news was probably lying and it was just fake news, which they all agreed upon, while Jinfrey, not listening to them, was busy thinking that there were a lot of them, making him wonder what he should do. Suddenly, someone called out from behind and asked him what the hell he was doing there. He looked back and saw a man pointing a knife at him, making him guess that it was probably a thief's skill covert that he hadn't even sensed their presence until now. That he laughingly raised both of his hands and told the man that he was not suspicious, but the man questioned him, asking if he was going to claim that he was just a non-suspicious person who had gotten lost in the streets. The man then told him that they had already killed a spy from another guild who had spouted the same nonsense a while back, which made Jinfrey look away in guilt. Suddenly, the man swung his knife at him, but Jinfrey jumped away in time to avoid it. He thought it was way too sudden and grabbed his centipede, guessing that there was no helping it. When he dodged the man's second attack, Jinfrey tripped him, and as the man was about to fall, Jinfrey hit him with the handle of his centipede from behind, making the man collapse to the ground. The other men heard the noise and wondered what it was. Unfortunately, one of the men saw him and shouted that there was someone there. The leader asked if it was another guild spy, but Jinfrey told them to wait and that he had no intention of fighting them because he just needed some cobalt bird feathers. He then raised both of his hands in the air, but then noticed that he was still holding his centipede, making him realize that no matter how they saw it, they would think he was the one who attacked their man. He admitted to himself that he was a fool for trying to talk it out with them. The leader noticed that he had knocked out their guard and ordered the men to kill him. Frustrated, Jinfrey told them that if he couldn't talk it out, he guessed he'd just have to take them by force. The bandits slowly approached him, and one of them launched an attack. He easily dodged it by pushing the man's arm aside and hitting the man's face with the flat side of his sword, causing the man to bleed and shout that his nose had been sliced. Calmly, he told the man that he had only been hit with the flat side of the sword and questioned his reaction, as he was only trying to rile them up. He mentioned that dealing with a guild usually turns into a one versus many situation, which is a hassle. Just then, another man appeared behind him. Shouting for him to die, he bent down to dodge the attack and kicked the man, who still managed to launch his spear at him, but he grabbed the spear, pulled the man closer, and hit his stomach with the sword handle. He was surprised when the system showed him that he had dealt a critical hit and the skill mines had been activated. The man rolled on the ground in pain while he apologized, guessing it must have hurt. Another bandit appeared, ready to strike with an axe, but he bent down in time to avoid it and struck the man's chin with the sword handle, pushing him back and causing him to scream in pain. He told them to cut him some slack because he didn't actually want to fight and they were reaping what they sowed. He then looked around for the cobalt bird feather, not noticing a man behind him, but he felt someone close and managed to block an attack from behind just in time. That he then saw another bandit who taunted him for leaving his back open. Realizing it was Covert, the same guy from earlier, they pushed each other, and the man introduced himself as the sub-master of that guild, Sub-Masao. Masao asked him if he was right that he had heard his name before, but he replied that it was his first time hearing it. He then asked Masao if he didn't find it embarrassing to introduce himself with that name, making Masao furious and shout that some things are better left unsaid. Masao then charged at him, shouting that he remembered him as the one they thrusted back in the city, and that they should have killed him back then. He easily blocked the attack, taunting Masao about using shoddy weapons and asking if he wasn't a thief. Masao teasingly told him to keep yapping, saying that although he might know how to swing, he probably just lucked out with his weapon. As Masao continuously attacked him, he mentioned that sometimes they are all adventurers with jobs, meaning equipment is just decoration and real power comes from developing their job skills. He asked Masao if that was so. Masao then forcefully attacked him, but he fortunately jumped to the side to avoid it. Masao called him a disrespectful twat and told him he could tell he was just a rookie from his equipment. He pointed out that his armor was the one given in the tutorial when he selected Compounder. Yet his weapon screamed high rarity, that he accused him of using that weapon to put on such bravado, but he kept his silence. Nasa then released a flurry of knives, arrogantly noting that it looked like his first time fighting an adventurer. Nasa aimed and threw the knives, but he easily blocked them. Nasawa told him that in a battle between adventurers, if one's job is known to the opponent, it puts them at an overwhelming disadvantage to ASA Compounder. The only skill he could use was Compound, meaning all he had to focus on was the movement of his sword. Masawa then asked him about his own job, saying he couldn't determine what skill he might use, that he confusedly asked Masawa if he was right that he was a thief, pointing out that the only job that could use covert was a thief. Masa was shocked and shouted that he was a summoner, which he awkwardly agreed to, starting to feel sorry for Masa. However, he knew he had to consider whether Masa had learned plunder as a skill, that if his centipede got swiped by Masa's plunder, it would be no joke. So he decided to end it quickly, that he rushed at AT Masa, ready to attack with his sword. But then two bandits appeared behind him, shocking him. They rushed to attack from behind, revealing they were also using covert. He managed to dodge their attacks and composed himself, unaware that he had struck someone from behind with his sword handle. He looked back and saw that he had hit Manhwa directly in a sensitive area. The system then showed him that he had dealt a super critical hit, activating his mind's eye skill. Manhwa was stunned for a moment before, screaming loudly in pain and collapsing on the ground. The other bandits shouted for Manhwa to stay with them. Realizing the gravity of the situation, that he admitted it was his bad luck that he even got a super critical, that he then approached the bandits and told them it looked like the match was over. He warned them that if they didn't want to end up like Masuo, they should give him the cobalt bird feathers, making them scream and cry in fear. One of the bandits stutteringly asked if he said cobalt bird feathers and promised to bring them immediately. However, other bandits arrived, shouting that he had been knocking their people out and was probably from an enemy guild. Much to the relief of the two bandits in front of him, that he was surprised to see the whole thief guild thinking they sure popped out. Like some damn hornets, the bandits surrounded him, and one of them remarked that he had guts messing around with the Mountain Dog Guild. Another asked if they seriously called everyone there for one guy, but then they saw the sub-master collapsed on the ground and panicked. Asking what happened to Maso, they looked closer and noticed that their submaster was completely out cold. They began questioning if they were saying Jinfrey beat their submaster, but others couldn't believe it because they were talking about their submaster. They speculated that Masawa probably drank too much, and that guy was smacking him while he was drunk, implying Jinfrey was a cheap bastard. Jinfrey knew that Masa wasn't actually drunk, but certainly drunk on his meager power. Suddenly, someone asked what all the fuss was about, shocking the bandits. They saw a huge man walking closer, their guild master. The bandits rushed to report what happened, while Jinfrey looked silently at the guild master, betting his name was Guild Masa. The guild master asked his men if it meant someone came there and picked a fight with their guild, to which they replied yes. The bandits then pointed and told the guild master that even their submaster got handled. The guild master stared at Jinfrey for a moment, and Jinfrey stared back at the guild master, then confirmed it and asked Jinfrey which guild he was from, but Jinfrey replied that he was solo and not in any guild. The guild master asked if he meant he did it all by himself, and Jinfrey confirmed. The guild master laughed loudly and told him he liked him, offering to let him join their guild. Jinfrey was stunned and confused, and the bandits looked at their master, equally confused. The guild master explained that normally he'd make him regret putting his hands on their guild, but since he defeated Masa, he wasn't bad, so he offered him a place in the guild. The master put his hand on Jinfrey's shoulder, calling him homeboy, and asking if he was so happy he couldn't speak, suggesting they share some drinks first. Jinfrey, however, refused and pushed the guild master's hand away from his shoulder. But he then told the guild master that he was only there for the cobalt bird feathers and a little bit of revenge for the general store and the little girl. He asked the guild master who would want to join his mess of a guild and demanded that they bring him the cobalt bird feathers, stunning the guild master and causing the bandits to panic. The guild master asked if he heard that right, to which he confidently replied yes, adding that they were a shitty guild that only targeted the weak. Truly a mess. Enraged, the guild master raised his huge axe and attacked, causing the ground to shatter. But Jinfrey fortunately dodged it. The guild master lifted his axe again, stating that he had changed his mind. Pointing at Jinfrey, he declared that it was the first time he had met someone so impudent, so he would rough him up and turn him into his slave. Jinfrey noticed that the man wasn't a thief due to his attack power, but he jumped away to avoid the guild master's attack, pushed himself sideways on the ground to dodge the next strike, then backflipped to face the guild master. Creating distance, he knew it would be a hassle if the guild master started using his job skill, so he needed to beat him quickly. Rushing to the guild master, he attempted to slash his head off. The guild master bent down to avoid the attack and countered with surprising speed. Jinfrey successfully hit the guild master from the side with his sword handle, causing him pain. The guild master noticed that Jinfrey was swinging with the flat side of the sword, but he sure hit hard, so he should avoid taking his attacks head-on. Jinfrey surprise noticed the guild master's toughness. The guild master then unequipped his axe and put it back in his inventory, confusing Jinfrey, wondering why he unequipped his weapon. Jinfrey watched as the guild master activated his in-fight skill and showcased his fighter passive skill, which doubled his physical stats for 3 minutes upon unequipping a weapon. The bandits cheered for their master, as Jinfrey realized the guild master was a fighter. The guild master then launched his fist at Jinfrey, who ran to the side at speed, causing the guild master to hit the wall behind him instead. Jinfrey knew he'd probably explode in one blow if he got hit, but was surprised when the guild master appeared in front of him with incredible speed, ready to punch again. The guildmaster launched his fist at Jinfrey, shouting for him to die, but Jinfrey calmly raised his sword, waiting for the fist to get closer, that he then hit the guildmaster hard in the stomach with his sword handle, dealing a critical hit while dodging the guildmaster's attack at the same time. The guildmaster screamed in pain, shocking his guild members that he then slammed to the ground, causing the members to panic as he had defeated their guildmaster. One of them noticed that he was the new adventurer who was in the news because of his black hair and blue eyes. He looked at them, confirming their suspicions that he was the I in the news. The bandits shouted that they were not mistaken, calling him the blue-eyed Jinfrey, which confused him. When he called out to them, they jumped in shock, but then ran away in fear, surprising him that he wondered how they knew his name and why they left their guild master behind, that he decided not to dwell on it, focusing instead on finding the cobalt bird feathers and returning the treasures in the warehouse to the store. Later, he was in Sigrun Falls by Rank Dungeon, walking out in surprise that the boss battle had ended in an instant. The system showed that he had defeated the boss monster, Baphomet, which was level 35 and received experience points. That he walked closer to the fallen goddess statue, stopping when he was near it. He then told it that he had missed it, that he knew that by solving the mechanism of the goddess statue, he could obtain the second hidden equipment, that he took out the Cyclops eye and the cobalt feather from his inventory for their touching reunion, that a person with good intuition would know at a glance that there was a trick in the eye of the stone statue, and a few people had noticed that the left eye socket could be fitted with the Cyclops eye. However, as far as Jinfrey knew, no one had noticed the gap in the wing's on its back that was the size of a single feather. When he finished placing the cobalt feather, the system showed that the wish of the fallen goddess's statue had been fulfilled. The statue then lit up, and tears fell from the goddess's eyes, which the system showed as tears of joy. The goddess's tears then poured into a gold cup, which released the second hidden equipment. The system showed that it was Lucifer's halo, with an unknown rank, 100 luck, and 2000 durability. Its skill 1 was mind reading, which read other people's emotions and thoughts. Skill 2 was magic perception, which sensed the magical power of adventurers and monsters within a 5 kilometers radius. Skill 3 was still unknown until certain conditions were met, that he was sure that with such a powerful function, it made sense that it was so hard to get, that he looked up at the fallen goddess statue and told her that he'd put Lucifer's halo to good use, which made the goddess smile without him noticing, because he was busy equipping it right away. That he then placed the ring above his head, worried because it made him look like a spirit or something. That he was annoyed because he didn't really want to stand out too much, but he thought people wouldn't think it was broken equipment based on its appearance. He smiled, thinking that now he had obtained Lucifer's halo, he could tackle the S-rank dungeon. A moment later, he arrived at the Adventurer Guild and was frustrated to see that the only S-rank available was the Agni Volcano dungeon. Due to its danger, only a party of 7 or more people was allowed to enter. He was frustrated because there was no recruitment for members at the moment. That he knew that when the boss monster residing in an S-rank dungeon was defeated, the whole dungeon disappeared, but after a while, it would randomly respawn in a different place on the same continent. Additionally, by defeating the first demon god, they would receive a title allowing them to go to the second continent, eager to reach the next continent as soon as possible. He then heard other adventurers shouting that they saw Frenna the Flame Magician's party, which caught his attention. Looking where they were pointing, he saw a guild resting nearby and a lady named Frenna Ashbury, who was 23 years old, level 45, and a magician. His Lucifer's halo activated using its skill 1 mind reading. He sensed her desire, and the system showed him that Frenna wanted to challenge the S-rank dungeon as soon as possible, but faced a problem due to a lack of members. He smiled, knowing it was good timing and glad that Lucifer's halo came in handy right away. Frenna then told the man in front of her that it was decided, and the man responded that they should disperse for today. He approached them and asked if he could join their party, but they didn't answer. Focusing on his Lucifer's halo, frustrated, he realized that even without the skill, he could guess what they thought of him. One of the men told him that after discussing it, they had come to the conclusion to give up for now and suggested he hit up someone else if he needed a party. That he used his mind reading skill and sensed compassion from the man. The system showed him that the man was thinking about an injured party member who was in the hospital. Understanding their situation, he faced Frenna and said he would like to hear the opinion of the leader. That he then told her that she looked a bit anxious in his eyes and asked if she had something urgent to do in the S-rank dungeon. She replied that it was none of his business, yet he sensed anxiety in her and realized she was worried about her father, an adventurer, who hadn't returned from the S-rank dungeon for over a month, he sensed another wave of anxiety. And when the system showed it to him, he kicked it in anger because it revealed that Frena was looking at the halo above his head. Thinking there was something wrong with him, Duddy then apologized for his late introduction and introduced himself as Jinfrey. Duddy told them that he also wanted to enter the S-rank dungeon as soon as possible. Frena wondered where she had heard his name before, and the man next to her remembered it, asking if he was the one mentioned in the news. The one who defeated 33 monsters at the baptismal altar. He couldn't believe it was Jinfrey because he looked weak. Jinfrey realized he had made the news and understood that the system revealed everything about him. Frena felt a bit off about him, noticing that it seemed like he was reading her mind. Despite this, she didn't think she was influenced by the news. She sensed that he had an atmosphere different from other adventurers around, as if he had already been through a lot. Jinfrey sensed an off feeling in Frena and saw that she felt a strange awe in his presence, making him think things were looking up. She then told him that she understood and would let him join their party, shocking her other members. She stood up and told him that if he was useless, they would leave him behind. He just smiled in response, knowing that everything went well and that he could finally go to the S-rank dungeon. A moment later, they entered the S-rank dungeon Agni Volcano. Jinfrey was busy thinking about his position in the party as the vanguard, the most dangerous position in an emergency, making him think that Frena, the captain of the party, was quite ruthless. One of the men whispered to Frena, asking if it was really okay to put Jinfrey in their party and expressing his lack of trust in him. She replied that there was no problem if Jinfrey was useful, great, and if not, he could be their bait. Another man approached Jinfrey and asked if he was really the guy in the news. Jinfrey replied that he guessed it was him since he hadn't heard the news directly, making the man stare at him. The system showed that he sensed distrust because the man named Arthur didn't believe him, making Jinfrey realize that Arthur was really skeptical. Another man then remarked that it was obviously a lie, asking if Arthur thought Jinfrey was strong just because he wore an angel's halo. Jinfrey was frustrated, thinking they should leave his halo alone, knowing that despite its appearance, it was a completely busted piece of equipment. That he was then surprised when the system showed that skill 2 of the halo, magic perception, had been activated and an unknown magical power movement had been detected. He couldn't believe that the monsters near the summit had all started coming down at the same time. He immediately shouted at them to shield the user and use their skills to cover everyone. The man was confused, but Jinfrey urged them to be quick because it was going to start erupting. The man was about to scold him for his tone, but then the volcano exploded, shocking everyone. Jinfrey shouted for them to guard themselves as flaming stones headed their way. They gathered together and protected the user, with one of the men raising his hands and using Reflect Guard to shield everyone from the molten boulders. Jinfrey noticed that it was raining molten boulders, meaning they couldn't move until it finished. Frena then ordered them to stand by and wait. She walked forward, raised her wand, and cast Meteorite Blaze. She swung her wand forward, and the meteorite blaze moved in the direction of her wand, dissolving every molten boulder coming their way. Everyone was in shock and amazement, but Jinfrey knew she had used her magic to vaporize the volcanic rocks. Then the ground split and shook, shocking everyone. Arthur shouted as the ground beneath him split, and he fell. Fortunately, Jinfrey grabbed his hand in time, saving him from falling into the depths. Unfortunately, the ground he was holding onto collapsed, causing him to panic. With no choice, he fell with Arthur into the depths, knowing the height was bad news for them. But just as they were close to the ground, they landed on a cotton bat, level 38, which saved them. He sighed and told Arthur that it was a cotton bat and they were saved, guessing it was probably because of his 100 luck from the halo. But then the cotton bat looked back in anger, sensing them, which made Jinfrey panic. He told Arthur they should jump down. They jumped away and faced the bat. Jinfrey explained that it absorbs impacts and launches them as counterattacks, so the impact of their fall would probably get amplified several times, and they needed to be careful. Arthur stutteringly replied that he didn't need to be told that. Jinfrey shouted to Arthur it was coming. Arthur was stunned in shock when he saw it approaching. Jinfrey immediately moved, grabbed Arthur, and dodged the huge rocks thrown at them. Pushing Arthur to safety, Jinfrey reminded him to be careful and warned that if he didn't want to die, he should stay put. Jinfrey then faced the cotton bat. Arthur looked back at where he had been standing, realizing that if Jinfrey hadn't pushed him away, he would have been crushed. Arthur couldn't believe the cotton bat's destructive power for a normal monster and understood that they were in an S-rank battlefield. He was even more shocked when he saw Jinfrey easily slash the cotton bat in half, wondering what had just happened and if Jinfrey really defeated it in one hit. Meanwhile, Freyna cast her dowsing skills that a man asked if she had found anything, to which she replied that Arthur was still alive, making everyone happy. She couldn't believe Jinfrey had fallen while trying to save Arthur, and noted that he had detected the eruption faster than anyone. One of the men suggested they also go down, but she disagreed. She explained that searching for Arthur would drain their energy before the battle with the demon god, and their objective was to defeat the demon god and bring peace to the continent, even if it was just momentary. She reminded them that they were aiming for the same summit, and that if they just proceeded forward, they were bound to regroup. She assured them not to worry, because Arthur was her brother and she had taught him herself. However, she was secretly begging Arthur to make it to the top safely and hoping her father was safe too. And on the other hand, after Arthur, Jinfrey asked if Freyna was his sister. Realizing Arthur was also searching for his missing father, Jinfrey then told Arthur he had calmed down and was going to start moving, shocking Arthur, who followed him while stutteringly asking where he was going when the demon god was at the summit. Jinfrey asked Arthur if he wanted to challenge the demon god at his level, warning him that he would die if he did. He explained that he was going to do a bit of hunting down below. The system showed that Arthur was feeling conflicted and also wanted to get stronger. So Jinfrey told him he should come along if he wanted to get stronger. A moment later, they were both deeper into the dungeon, and Arthur awkwardly laughed when he saw flame bone birds, which were level 41-42. Arthur then asked Jinfrey what he meant by a bit of hunting. Arthur noticed that the flame bone birds were higher level than the cotton bat from earlier, and he thought that if it were one-on-one, they might stand a chance, but against so many, it seemed impossible. However, he was shocked when Jinfrey moved forward and started slashing and killing the flame bone birds effortlessly. Arthur realized Jinfrey was strong, but didn't notice a flame bone bird launching an attack from behind. Fortunately, Arthur felt it in time and jumped away before being grilled to death. Arthur then grabbed his knife, but the bird flew up and launched down to attack him again. Knowing he couldn't let it get close, he took out his bow and arrow, aiming at the bird. When the distance was right, he released the arrow, successfully piercing the flame bone bird's head and killing it. Exhausted, he told the bird not to look down on him because he wouldn't lose in a one-on-one fight. He then remembered Jinfrey and looked at him worriedly, but Arthur was shocked to see Jinfrey sitting in the middle of a swarm of dead flame. Jinfrey looked at Arthur and asked if he was done, all while chewing on food. Arthur was stunned and realized Jinfrey was eating the dropped item, flame bone bird meat, which tasted like fried chicken. Although it could be eaten as is, it would taste better after reheating. While Arthur was behind him, wondering what he was doing, Jinfrey felt sick from eating too fast. He knew he needed to eat 50 of those to get a buff. The system then showed Jinfrey that a large amount of mana was heading their way. Surprising him, he immediately looked back, food still in his mouth, and stood up in shock when he saw a salamander level 45, the mid-boss of Agni Volcano, that he broke into a sweat, not just from fear, but because of his upset stomach, which caused all his stats to decrease by 30%. After vomiting, Jinfrey warned Arthur to be careful, explaining that the salamander was a subspecies that had higher stats from eating a human. Suddenly, the salamander swung its tail and hit Arthur, slamming him against the wall. Jinfrey worriedly asked Arthur if he was all right. Arthur spat out blood and replied that he was fine. Jinfrey told Arthur he'd take care of it and that he should hide somewhere safe. Facing the salivating salamander, Jinfrey noticed its sluggish movements and asked if it was having a stomach ache too, suggesting it had just eaten. Jinfrey noticed the salamander was shaking, making him wonder if it was going to throw up, which it did, expelling a lot of waste. He saw human bones and accessories among the vomit, which he had expected. However, Arthur was stunned and horrified when he saw a sword and shattered clothes among the debris, recognizing them as his father's. Jinfrey told the salamander they should settle things before they both barfed again, which it seemed to agree with. Arthur, shaking, grabbed the sword and clothes, sensing a vengeful heart from Arthur. The system showed Jinfrey that Arthur had intense murderous intent towards the salamander. He looked back in confusion and saw Arthur seriously telling the salamander it was dead meat. Arthur then drew his knife, launching at the salamander and shouting that it was for his father, drawing the salamander's attention. Jinfrey shouted for Arthur to stop and calm down, but Arthur didn't listen. The salamander hit him with its tail, throwing him back. Arthur stood up and told it he would rip it to pieces. He launched again, but Jinfrey pinned him down, shouting and asking if he was deaf because he had told him to stop. Arthur shouted for Jinfrey to shut up and let him go. Jinfrey reminded Arthur that he was really going to die and that salamanders weren't something people hunted solo. Arthur arrogantly asked so. One and told Jinfrey to get off him. Jinfrey shouted for Arthur to calm down for a second and asked what would happen to the rest of their family if he also ended up dead, which stopped Arthur in his tracks. Jinfrey told Arthur that he knew the salamander wasn't something he could beat alone. Arthur, tearing up, replied that he knew it, but asked what else he was supposed to do when his father's belongings came. Out of the salamander, Jinfrey saw Arthur cry, and the system showed him Arthur's anger and powerlessness, his fists tightening. Jinfrey let go of him and apologized for yelling, but he then seriously addressed Arthur, asking if his job was a hunter and if he could use the battle cry skill. That he asked Arthur what was in his inventory, confusing Arthur, who replied that he had some healing herbs, a bow, arrows, and cotton bat's fluff. Arthur didn't know why cotton bat's fluff was in his inventory. Jinfrey explained that it was from the hunter's hidden ability and told him it looked like he had some good stuff. Arthur asked what he meant by hidden ability, but Jinfrey told him they would talk about it later. He instructed Arthur to listen closely because he had a plan. If things went well, they should be able to defeat the salamander. After explaining the plan to Arthur, Jinfrey told him they should proceed as discussed. Arthur agreed, thinking they could defeat the salamander together. Arthur stared at the salamander in anger while Jinfrey stepped closer to it. Jinfrey instructed Arthur to buff him, and Arthur agreed, calling upon the spirits within his words to arise and lead Jinfrey to victory. Arthur then used Battle Cry, and the system showed that Jinfrey received a boost from Arthur's skill, invigorating him for 5 minutes and increasing his strength and speed by 30%. The salamander, sensing this, was shocked. Arthur then handed Jinfrey the cotton bat's fluff he had asked for. Jinfrey thanked him and mentioned that the battle cry skill had made his stomach feel much better, and he reminded Arthur to stick to the plan. Jinfrey then charged at the salamander at high speed. The salamander noticed and waited for him to get closer. Jinfrey knew it had a lot of health points, so the standard procedure usually involved attacks from a large number of players. He slashed the salamander with his centipede sword, heavily poisoning it and making it scream in pain. But he smiled, knowing he had used the centipede's poison effectively. An arrow then hit the salamander in the head. He looked back and saw that Arthur had shot it, just as they had planned, aiming for the salamander's weak point between its eyebrows. Jinfrey saw Arthur taking out another arrow and aiming at the salamander. He appreciated that Arthur's long-range attacks would help while he attacked in close range with his centipede sword. Together, they continuously attacked the salamander, weakening it within minutes. But Jinfrey knew the real challenge was just beginning. The salamander then changed into its berserk mode, increasing all its stats by 30%. Arthur covered his face, unable to believe the strength of the berserk mode, feeling the heat wave even from a distance. Despite this, Jinfrey ran closer to attack, knowing the salamander's stats had increased but deciding to take advantage of the situation by gripping the cotton bat fluff tightly. The salamander launched an attack, and Jinfrey met it in the middle with the cotton bat fluff in front. He smiled, knowing the preparations were complete. That I in berserk mode. The salamander's weak point had shifted from between its eyebrows to its front leg. Arthur aimed and released an arrow, successfully hitting the new weak point. Simultaneously, Jinfrey slashed the other front leg, making the salamander scream in pain. They continued attacking the salamander together, without stopping until it lowered to the ground, surprising Arthur. They both noticed it had become slower and had stopped attacking. Jinfrey walked closer to check and saw that the flames surrounding its body had weakened, indicating it was in a critical state. However, he knew it could regenerate its health points by swallowing the surrounding flames. The system then showed him that the salamander was in regeneration mode and recovering its health points. Arthur realized that if they didn't act quickly, they wouldn't be able to defeat it within the 5-minute window of the battle cry buff. Arthur confidently aimed his arrow and shouted to Jinfrey that he was ready. Jinfrey faced the regenerating salamander and affirmed Arthur's readiness. Well guys, that's the end of the video. If you like this video, comment part 2 in the comment section. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and like the video. Thank you for watching and see you next time again.